Ask any child of the 80s to name a favourite toy line of the era and you'll get a range of responses. The most common are likely to be Transformers, the Care Bears, Cabbage Patch Kids or He-Man, because nobody said Masters of the Universe Mattel. Who you kidding? It's all about that dude with his weird blonde hair. They may, of course, have said G.I. Joe or Action Force, depending on what side of the Atlantic they resided in. They may even have said Sylvanian families if they liked dead-eyed felt-covered animals dressed up as the Waltons. One toy line they are probably not likely to bring up, however, are the Centurions, a toy that combined concepts from Lego, Action Man and Transformers. How could it possibly fail? It failed to grab the public's attention, so this is going to be a popular video then. Great. Power X-TREME! Produced by Ruby Spears, not Britney's elderly relative but a pair of former Hanna-Barbera employees, and animated by Japanese studio Sunrise, Centurions Power X-TREME was a 1986 65-episode syndicated cartoon series. Centurions Power X-TREME was no doubt an attempt to hook a bandwagon onto the lucrative toy advert presented as a kids animated show train. The show followed the eponymous Centurions as they continue their endeavours to thwart the dark machinations of Doc Terror and his cohort Hacker. Doc Terror wants to conquer Earth and turn the planet's inhabitants into robot slaves. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of up for that as long as there's a USB socket somewhere on my torso. I'm never near one when I need to recharge my phone. Also, very few fat robots in literature. Electricity has no calories. I can eat what I like. The slave thing, I'm not overly keen on, but guaranteed employment is definitely an advantage. So yeah, back off Centurions, I'm on Doc Terror's side. Make me a robot slave. The Centurions all have badass names that make me wish that I was born to different parents. Jake Rockwell, Max Ray and Ace frickin' Cloud are all names that girls would think are hunky. Cleverly, their names indicate their roles. Jake is a land-based operative, Ace hangs out with the seagulls and the woodfinches amongst the heavens, and Ray draws the short straw because he has to swim around with the turds and the creatures and things like that in the deep sea. Poor Max. So they do this by fitting machinery into their special suits that enable them to engage in such activity. So Ace, for example, gets a load of air-based equipment, so he becomes like a human jet plane. All this clicking, cool-ass cybernetic equipment is sent down from space by none other than this sexy lady Crystal Kane, who sounds, from that name, like she has at least 180 videos on Pornhub, or so I've heard. The cybernetic conceit is a pretty solid one, with the themes of the show sometimes exploring the relationship of humans and technology, or occasionally it has a pro-ecological theme, common amongst many cartoons of the era. Essentially, though, it's daft cyborg men fighting each other with bolt-on rockets and stuff. It's all American, all action, willy out and big balls exposed, 80s schlock that made no sense, and that's why it's great. Launching ordnance from your body doesn't seem like a good idea though, and it always looked like it hurt on things like Jackass when they had like fireworks up their bums. Anyway, still, Centurions, despite this wonderful concept, didn't do very well, hence why it lasted just that one series, but it did just well enough to get it a video game, which it's time to point our corneas at. Released by Reactor Software, a middling software house who released games like Deactivators, Mounty Mix, Death Ride and another toy license in Challenge of the GoBots. But you know what? That's not what they're famous for. They are most famous for releasing a game called Star Fox in 1987. Star Fox was the title that resulted in Nintendo changing the name of the more famous Star Fox title to Starwing and then later Lilac Wars in the UK to avoid the wagging finger of the lawyers. For whatever reason, they don't care now, it's just called Star Fox. So, what are they worried about? The game itself was programmed by Tony Crowther's WE Music team, who were of course very famous for their work with the Commodore 64 sound chip, which might be why the mysterious AN Other handled the programming aspect of the Spectrum port, because he's a bit ashamed of it, because it's not very good. The Centurions game sees the player explore multiple mazes looking for 3 keys to unlock Doc Terror's base. You can team up with another player if you like too. Some keys and areas of the base can only be accessed by using particular characters' skill sets. To do this, you return to the central base and walk through the appropriate box, be it land, sea or air. When Dr. T is thwarted in his attempts, you go back to the base, then you head to the exit and you go to the next maze. This involves a whole ton of to and froing, which can be fun in a game like, say, Dizzy or something, but in this, it's a dry, funless, boring slog, and boy oh boy is Centurions not pretty to look at either. Tiny flickery blobs colour clash against garish backdrops, creating a visual representation of every bad Spectrum greatest hits graphical issue. The enemy character designs are just lazy, sometimes very, very difficult to spot, and the Centurions themselves potter around like a 67-year-old retiree in the home base on a Sunday morning. Oh my god, this is an awful game. Centurions was an early indicator of the worst of the licensed game type. Lazy, rushed, and carrying a full price label that it just does not earn. I do try and find something positive in the games I play, but it's tricky with this one. The magazines of the time agreed. Your Sinclair gave it a 5 out of 10, calling it a tedious gauntlet clone which has been rendered completely unplayable by messy graphics and flickery scrolling. Crash poured scorn upon the title, with a 23% score, advising that Centurions just doesn't work on the Spectrum. All the things that could go wrong have. Sinclair Music gave it a 3, stating poor programming and game design managed to push a good idea well into the realms of complete dross. Steer clear. So, pretty unanimous derision for the Centurions Power X-TREME. Toy advert or no, if even today someone came up with the idea for a game with bolt-on attachments to solve various puzzles or conflicts, if handled correctly, a Centurions game would be great. The chance, though, was spurned, and the game, the toy line, and the TV shows are long gone, never to be rebooted again. Here then is the end screen, a link to loads of videos that aren't being watched. You should watch them because otherwise they sit there dormant like an old Argos catalogue that no one looks at anymore. And that makes me sad. Poor 1985 editions of Argos catalogues. There's also there a link to a guy called Real Generic Demon, who's got a fantastic channel where he looks at things like Master System games and Spectrum games, and he looks through tape cassettes which contain data from Spectrum games, and it's a real mystery about what's on them. So yeah, that's it for another episode. I'll be doing something un-Spectrum related for the next one. I think it's going to be tied in with wrestling again on the Super Nintendo. So that's it for today. Goodbye, Kay, thanks, bye.